Okay, so the tshuva that we're seeing today is called Din Kedimas Yehudi Lagoy B'Mekachu Memkar, giving priority to a Jew over a non-Jew in any kind of transaction. Now, we've learned this before when we learned the Imre Yaakov. We learned this concept that if you have an opportunity to buy or sell from or to a Jew versus a non-Jew, halacha states that you should give priority to a Jew. Now, what are the parameters of that? What if the Gentile can give you a much better price? So obviously, that's a consideration. What if the Jew is difficult to deal with? Which would never happen, of course, then, right? And the Gentile is much more reliable in his services and delivery and things like that. So that's a factor as well. So here we go. And of course, we all know that sometimes it's a bigger headache for other reasons to deal with a member of our own community than it is to deal with a non-Jew who's outside the community. And I don't have to worry about seeing this guy in shul and so forth. And so the question is, how do we maneuver this? Okay, so the shaila is Misha rotza liknot chayfetz mesuyam she'efshar liknoto mechanut shel Yehudi v'gam mechanut shel goy. A person has a piece of merchandise that he can either buy from the store of a Jew or from the store of a Gentile. V'hagoy mochro biyoter zol. Gentile is selling it for less money. Ha'im hu chayav b'chol zot liknot et hachayfetz meha-Yehudi. Is one still obligated to make the purchase from the Jew? So first, let's take a look at the source of this halacha. All right, so Katuv b'Torat Kohanim Parshat Bahar. So the Medrash in Parshas Bahar, the Sifri writes, Sha'adam shekone chayfet, or the Sifra rather, Sha'adam shekone chayfet tzarech liknoto miYisrael. When you buy goods, you should buy them from a Jew, preferentially. Shenemar, O kano miyad amitecha. As the Torah says, if you buy something from your fellow, v'yesh mitzvah lahaktim v'liknos meha Yisrael. So this is based on the Sifra. Sifra is a halachic midrash that you should always give preferential treatment to a vendor or a buyer who's a Jew. Because of Bishut HaRamah, the din ze shayach afim hagoy mocher yoter bezol. The Ramah writes in a tshuva that this is true even if the Gentile is selling it for less. The Hevi Raya Lazeme HaGemara Bebava Metzia. He brings proof from a Gemara. Sha'adam sheyesh lo kesef v'yachol lotet halva'a. V'yesh Yisrael shel tzarich et halva'a b'li ribit. V'yesh goy shegam tzarich halva'a muchan l'shalim ribit. Tzarich lahalvot liYisrael b'li ribit. Afal pi shehu mapsid et haribit sheyachol lekabel mehagoy. Okay, there's a halacha. And this halacha is brought down from the Gemara, that if a person has limited funds that he can do a mitzvah with, and he can either lend the money that he has, let's say, in his savings account, he can either lend it to a Jew as an interest-free loan, or he can lend it to a Gentile and get interest on the loan. The Gemara says you should preferably lend the money to a Jew without interest. Now, of course, which one saves you? Which one gets you more money? Which transaction gets you more money? Obviously, the interest-bearing loan. So what you see from here is that even when a mitzvah costs you money, because you could have made money off of a Gentile instead of doing it for free from a Jew, you still have an obligation to do that chesed to a Jew. Obviously within reason, but there's the principle still applies. And therefore, if you can buy it from a Jew, even if it's going to cost more money, you have to buy it from a Jew. Now, how much more money? And is this on a regular basis? Like I remember I used to go to a store, I think it closed recently, in Abad Gate, where they would sell, different items from Israel. So they've since closed. All of the items that they were selling, and I didn't understand the business model. I didn't understand how it was going to succeed. because they were selling the very same items that you could pick up at No Frills for much less money. But I wanted to support a mom and pop operation. So I would go maybe once a month, once every couple of months, and I would go in and spend my $20 or $30 on different things that I knew that we could buy much less expensive, just as a chesed, not because I was obligated to, not because I needed to buy it from there, but just as a chesed. So anyway, but what are there more parameters to this? V'hosef harama sham da'af sheyesh lidchot rayazu ki yesh chiluk bein minias revach levein adam shetzarach lahotzi kesef min hakis ulahafsid. So the Rama adds to this in his tshuva, and he says clearly one could make a very clear distinction between a loan and being forced to buy and spend more money for a purchase. He says with a loan, you're not being forced to go out of pocket. You're just forfeiting the opportunity to profit. Okay. Whereas when you have an opportunity, you don't know, I can either buy from A or buy from B, but A is more expensive than B. We're telling you to go out of pocket. Ki beribis lo marviach kesef, aval gam lo motzi kesef me'akis, ma she'ein kein keshekona me'ayisrael, shemocha yoser yakar me'agoy, tzarich lahotzi kesef me'akis, v'yitachen shelo tzarich lasot zot. And maybe therefore, just because the Gemara says that you're not, we tell you to, instead of making a profit, do a mitzvah without a profit, doesn't necessarily translate into this case necessarily. So therefore, the Rama brings another Gemara. Gemara in Psachim Shadar Shalapasuk Lo Tochlu Kol Nevela Lager Asher Bisharecha Titanena Va'achala O Machor Lenochri. It's based on the following pasuk, that you shall not eat any carrion to the righteous Gentile who observes the 7 Noachide laws. You shall give it because he lives in your gates, or sell it to a nochri, which is an idolater. Sha'adam sheyesh lo nevela ikdima haTorah sheyitna bechinam lager b'makom l'machri l'nochri. He says, so what you see from here is that the Torah places a priority on giving it to a righteous Gentile over giving it or over selling it to an idolater. So what we're talking about is a Gentile who observes the 7 Noachide laws. He's allowed to eat carrion. He's allowed to eat a dead animal, right? That wasn't shechted. So you should better that you give it to him as a gift than sell it to someone who worships idols. Even though you're going to lose money by giving it as a gift. So there is an out-of-pocket expense. We're telling you to relinquish that which is a commodity of yours and overselling it to a Gentile. He says, so anyway, all right, so he just speaks it out. Okay, so in any event, if that's the case, that there's a mitzvah to give preferential treatment to a ger toshav who's not a Jew, then certainly there would be a mitzvah to give preferential treatment to a Jew. Mikol makom, rakim hagoy mozil ma'at yikne me Yisrael, kamo hefresh b'mechir shel nevela lu'umat kshera. However, it's important to note that this halacha that you give the Jew preference over the Gentile for a purchase is only if there's a small differential in price between the two. Just like there's a small differential in price between carrion and kosher meat. Aval im Mosul harbe ein raya shetzarach lahaktim hayisrael. But if there's a huge differential in price, then we have no proof that you have to buy it from a Jew and go really out of pocket for much more. Because of Bishut Maramshik Shebichlal Mitzvah Zu, Yesh Lahaktim HaYisrael Gam Keshetzarech Lahatriach Et Atzma Lalechet Lachanu Shel Yisrael Shirechoka Yoter Mishel Goy. And the Maramshik writes that included in this mitzvah of giving the sale to the Jew over the Gentile, even if it's a little bit more, is also true if there's a great added inconvenience. Like, in other words, let's say the Jew's store is a little bit further away from your house. You should still give preference to the Jew over the Gentile. The Kasvu Aposkim, now, so he quotes the Sefer Chikrei Leiv, that it's only when there's a small price differential. He doesn't say how small that price differential is. And then he quotes from Rav Sternbach, who asks the question, how much do you have to be matriach? How much do you have to be matriach in order to give the sale to the Jew? Maybe it's the equivalent of walking a mill, having to travel a little bit farther. A mill is like a kilometer. V'sefer nesiv yosher heir dekandi yesh sad sheze mitzvah deoraisa shem yesh lav l'shrach yoser mimilvenu dama l'tilas yadayim utfila chadoma dahu midarabanan. Maybe you have to be matriach even more because you're fulfilling a mitzvah deoraisa. When we call makom mistaver deim litrach liknos meyudi korach ba'otzos kigon otzos and asiyah l'sham o shal yidei zeh mafsid zman meruba sheyochol laharviach leparnasaso. But he says it makes sense that if the added tircha is going to give you added costs, you have to pay for more gas or hire a taxi, or you're going to have to take off time from work, then you wouldn't have to be matriach, even if it's a shorter distance. As the poskim say that this mitzvah only applies when there's a small differential, not when there's a large differential. Okay. I know, it's very subjective. Yeah, right. And also, it also depends on how frequent it is. Let's say it's a constant purchase. So that has a cumulative effect, right? So let's say there's only a penny difference, but I'm buying 1 million of these items, right? So that could make a huge difference. Yeah, obviously, right. If your business is money lending, then yeah, that's also true, right? If the way you make money is by investing it in a bank. Yeah.
Or even if you buy wholesale, from a Jew versus a goy, you make more money if it's a business thing versus a personal thing.
I don't think there's any distinction between personal and business. Here we're talking about a consumer. We're talking about a consumer who's making a purchase. He may not be a businessman. He just wants to buy a dozen eggs, and he can either go to the makolet that's 2 blocks away and pay $2, or he can go to the Supersol, the supermarket that's owned by a non-Jew and pay $1.85. Okay, so you got to sort of ask yourself the question, like, who do I, is the 15 cents going to make a big difference or not for me? It's a very subjective issue. Remember, this is a mitzvah of chesed, and when it comes to the mitzvah of chesed, we can't obligate you to do this. We can't tell you what is too much to spend the chesed on. You have to make that determination on your own. Let's see. Okay, that's a very good question. The Kasvu Aposkim duadin b'shnei Yisraelim. The poskim say that this also applies to 2 Jews. Im echad Talmud Chacham mitzvah lahakdimo. If one of them is a Torah scholar, you should give preferential treatment to the Torah scholar. Kevin shekasuf b'pasuk shehevenu la'el amisecha v'darshu chazal im sheitcha or am sheitcha b'Torah uv'mitzvahs. As our sages interpret from the word amitecha, if you make a purchase from your fellow the word amitecha doesn't just mean fellow, but has the word am in it, that he is with you in Torah and mitzvahs. So that also indicates that if one is from and the other one is not from, you should give preferential treatment to the from guy or the one who's a Talmud Chacham. But obviously, you have to ascertain that the guy is from. Just because he has long payas, a long beard, doesn't mean he's more of a from guy than the Chiloni guy at the Makolet, who maybe is supporting a dozen widows, whereas the from guy is all in this all without supporting anyone else, right? And maybe the reason why the Chiloni guy at the Makolet is charging a few pennies more is because he's extending credit to more widows and orphans than the other guy is. So, there's a lot to take into consideration. Don't allow, I spoke about this on Shabbos, those of you who were at my drasha. I told you the story about a guy who I don't consider from, who's a member of this Thornhill Jewish community, not a member of the Bayit, who was ripping people off right and left. And he'd be the last person on my list. I'd give a Gentile, I'd give a Buddhist my business before I gave this guy my business, right? Because if I had a business, because he's a walking Chilul Hashem, this guy, right? So anyway, okay. So he quotes the footnote quotes from the Shulchan Aruch. The Mechaber writes, "Pasak Marn b'Shulchan Aruch v'Zelashanu, Hayu lefanav aniyim harbe ve'ein bekis lefarnes o lechasos o liftos es kulam." This is in Hilchos Tzedakah, that if you have in front of you many poor people who are all seeking support, and you don't have enough in your pocket to support all of them, Makdim HaKohen LeLevi, VaHalevi LeYisrael v'chulei. So you have to give a prioritization system, and you should give to the Kohen first, then to the Levi, then to the Yisrael. But when is that so? Bisman shehem shovim b'chachma, when they're all equally pious or impious. Aval im haya mamzer talmid chacham v'kohen gadol am haaretz, mamzer talmid chacham koydem b'chulei. Right? But that's the example the Mishnah gives. But if there was a mamzer who's a Torah scholar, he takes priority even over a Kohen Gadol if the Kohen Gadol is an ignoramus, right? Which is obviously a very far-fetched kind of scenario, but it's given for dramatic effect. Anyone who's greater in Torah knowledge takes priority. Now, Chazinan deyeshdin lahaktim Talmud Chacham. So we see that there is this concept of giving preference to a Talmud Chacham. So he says that the Chafetz Chaim in Sefer Avos Chesed says that the same thing is true for making a loan. If you have two people who are seeking a loan, and one is really, really a Talmud Chacham, and the other one is not, you have to give preference to the Talmud Chacham. Everything's a judgment call. Yeah. I guess when everything else is equal. And this is also a tshuva from Tshuvas V'Hanagos. He writes as follows. Shamati me'ed neman she'Rabbeinu hachazonish zatzal hikbid ma'od liknos dafka eitzel shomer Shabbos. He said, I heard from a reliable witness who was an eyewitness to this, that the Chazon Ish always took care to try to make his weekly purchases from a Shomer Shabbos Jew. He's here liknot eitzel shomer Shabbos. And whenever he would send someone to get his prescription, he would always tell him to pick up the prescription from a shomer Shabbos. Even though the store was further away from the more local pharmacy, based on this halacha, you should give preferential treatment to your amitecha, which is your fellow Jew who is with you in your observance of mitzvahs. So This law should be taken into consideration. You have a member of the community. It's interesting he gives the example of a pharmacy because we have a pharmacist in our shul, who is seeking the business. So again, the question is, how far do you have to go to support him? What if I have a long-term relationship with another pharmacist that I've been friends with for years and I don't want to sever ties with the person all of a sudden for absolutely no reason? Okay. There's so many different calculuses to take into consideration, but it's when everything else is equal. Person should realize that this is a factor in doing chesed. Okay, so and then what's the last thing he says? Mitzvah he lo rak al hakoine. Excuse me. The mitzvah is not just on the purchase, but it's on the vendor, it's on the seller as well. That if a person is seeking to sell a piece of merchandise and he has two prospective buyers, or he wants to sell a house and he has two prospective buyers, Yaktim HaYisrael Lagoy. See, a lot of people don't realize this, and they put up their house for sale, and they say, well, I'll give it to whichever one gives me the higher price. So the Arab offers you 976, Jew offers you 974, okay, on your house. So which one are you going to sell it to? Okay. So try to get as much as you can from the Jew. But if at the end of the day there's a very small price differential, you'll be doing not only you'll be doing the neighborhood a favor by maintaining the Jewish character of the neighborhood by selling your house to a Jew. Oh, yeah, listen, something you got to think about, those of us who are downsizing and thinking of, selling our homes. But it's also a mitzvah of chesed to try to give the Jew the sale within reason, right? In other words, if the Gentile is undercutting the Jew by a significant amount, so then you're not mechuyev. But just take that into consideration that it is one aspect of chesed. Va'afilu im hagoy mosif ma'at yoter yaktim et Yisrael, and even if the Gentile is offering to pay a little bit more, you should still give the business to the Jew. V'yiftach b'Hashem she'yishlach lo bracha bekaspo, and place your trust that God will give you a blessing in your income. That you ask yourself the question: will those extra $2,000 in the larger frame of things, is that really going to make a huge amount of difference to my life? And if the answer is yes, okay, so you do what you have to do. But so you could also have bitachon that Hashem will supplement the loss you're going to take by selling it to the Jew instead of the Gentile. Okay, all right. Let's take a look at the last footnote. Kain kasav b'sefer Abbas Chesed, shekain kasav b'sifra v'nilbad mi'apaser b'chisimkru mimkar la'amitecha o kano miyad amitecha, because it says both selling and buying in the pasuk of selling it to your amitecha, to your fellow. In basalim kar timkar liyisrael chaverech, and whenever you want to sell, you should sell to preferentially to a Jew. Okay. Any comments, questions? Pretty straightforward, huh?
It was really for us, it's a networking opportunity for a lot of.
Sure.
There must be 500-600 people there. I'm not studying part of it, so what we need to work. He spoke about exactly this concept about keeping it within the city, and how how that builds empowering community growth. Exactly what Buck was giving the opportunity to a Jewish person over non-Jewish person, and how it can just grow exponentially as a result of doing that.
Exactly. And the truth is, many times it's extremely beneficial to the business. Like there are many businesses in the New York area that, that the office, maybe has 100 employees and the majority of them are from. It creates a fantastic dynamic because you all know that everyone has the same values. You can shut the business on Shabbos without having to worry about things happening incorrectly because everyone is resting on the same day. You also can have activities for the corporation that are Jewish oriented. You can have kosher food. You can have minyanim. In other words, there's so many advantages potentially. And you also know that in general, if a guy is a Ben Torah, he's not going to try to scam a fellow Jew who gave him an opportunity. But again, it all depends. Like in certain industries, which involve a lot of grunt work, like a lot of physical labor, sometimes you're better off not hiring a Jew because he may not be used to working as hard as the Filipino guy who's gonna carry 2 boxes at a time instead of the Jew who's gonna open the box and take out each item because it doesn't want to strain his back, So, okay, it all depends. Okay. So was there consensus? Like, did people accept what this fellow said? Yeah.
A roofer and it's how money would look at the velocity, you get velocity. The more money circulates within the community, the faster it grows.
The more the community prospers. Look, I will tell you, my son runs a real estate business, and he wanted to employ, a Jewish contractor. And the person who screwed him over the most was this frum guy. Okay. And it's, so there's always stories like that where, someone who is allegedly frum, and I actually have in mind specific kinds of frum people that you want to try and avoid. I'm not going to say it publicly. I'm not going to say it for posterity in a recording, but there's a certain kind of frum Jew who, for whatever reason, is known to cut corners with ethics and to try and get away with as much as he can, even at the expense of the person who hires him. And so that's all I'm going to say. You just have to be discriminating. Ona'ah, yeah, the laws of Ona'ah. Yeah, well, I don't know that the criterion here could be much less than 1/6 of a differential.